Hello, everyone. This is Saloni Jain. Welcome to the Sun Icon podcast. Here, we go behind the scenes with founders building on bold and unconventional ideas.
Hi, I'm Darshan. Today we are really excited to have Shoaib Merchant, the founder of Mecha Systems. They're building a handheld Linux computer.
So, they like to call it the Comet. It is a beautiful mix of hardware, aesthetics, and software.
So Shoaib, for those who are listening in this podcast, can you tell them what is Mecha Comet?
Yeah. So the Mecha Comet, let me grab this. It's a Linux-based handheld computer. We started designing this almost 3 years back now. The idea of the Comet is to take computing, right, which typically you see all around you they become utility now, right? You have your laptops, you have your smartphones, right? These have become utility, but they have lost the sense of creation, right? They have become devices that we consume or we utilize in our daily lives, right? And I wanted to build something where it enables you to be able to have full control, right? You have an open ecosystem. You choose what you would like to build, right? And you can opt the kind of software you want to use or the kind of hardware you want to attach to it or build further, right? It's interesting in a way that today we are, like, to me it feels like a dystopian world, right, where we are surrounded with hardware, right? We buy it, right, but we really don't have a control. Yesterday I was just talking to my cousins and we were just discussing, and they are young, they're just entering college right now, and they were saying, I don't know if my phone is recording, right, or I don't know that, right?
Yeah.
And see, to me, that is the kind of issues that are there in the kind of hardware that is available today, right? And that's something where we are trying to build an hardware which goes back to the basics of computing, right? Where we are focusing on the computing side of it and not really look at it as a monetization tool. Yeah.
Interesting. But there are other devices out there, right? So, how is Mecha Comet different?
Yeah, I think, see, there are a lot of devices today, no doubt. We are all surrounded by it. We spend on average 4 hours on our phones, right? But somehow these devices today, they are designed now for a wider audience, right? To me, it feels like commoditized, right? It appeals to, and it's like a utility for you. You are either using it to communicate, you are either using it as a online collaboration tool, or maybe just simple as WhatsApp or even watching videos.
Right.
But if you look back and think about the early days of computing, when computing started, right, you didn't really have hardware which is a utility, right? So now what has happened is, to be able to attract a mass audience, right, these hardwares have become more and more closed, right? For an engineer like me, right, there is not a lot of opportunity to do further with the hardware, right? You are still stuck in a walled garden, right? We are going on an entirely other end of the spectrum, where we say that this is not a walled garden, it's an open garden. You choose what you want to build, you choose the kind of software you would like to run, and you have all the liberties with you. So the kind of things that we have prioritized is repairability, right? Which means that if you're buying the hardware today, right, you should be able to repair it on your own, right? The spare should be easily available. It should not require like a fancy, like a fancy guide or specialized tools for you to be able to repair your own hardware. So that is one of the priorities. Long lasting, right? So the kind of software support that we are offering, by principle, the software stack running on the Comet is open source, which means that either at any point of time, users are not dependent on Mecha or our team essentially to support all the hardware for perpetuality, right? Because then obviously we are going to support for as long as we can, right? But the thing is, because it runs open source, right? Everybody is free to be able to do whatever they like. At any point, they can update the software, they can continue to maintain it, even if it is your own device.
Right.
You can't say that is true for your
iPhone.
tablets or iPhones or Android devices, right? When there is end of support, it is end of support, right? Then it becomes waste, right? It becomes like a piece that is hanging on in your homes, right? And it's not useful, right? And it's still
I still
good
have
hardware.
a 10-year-old iPad. I don't know what to do with it.
You can't do anything.
I
with
don't
it.
feel like throwing it, but I can't figure out the right use case.
Yeah, but that's a waste, right? Like, and that's where we are trying to work on a different approach, where we say that, okay, no, if you buy the hardware, you get all the rights associated with it, right? So that's one of the core things that we are doing. And one of the things that we have done is we have made our hardware modular. Like we think that computers needs to be more, wide applicability, right? So if today you have a smartphone, it is still a computer that is a smartphone,
Right.
You're still limited by it being a phone, right? So the way that we designed the Comet is that you do not have limits. So this has an add-on system, right? You can see that this is a keyboard. This is a keyboard add-on. You could just snap it in, and that's it. It just connects itself. Now, the key thing is we are keeping all of these extension designs as fully open hardware, which means anybody can actually make their own extension. They can publish it, and there can be a community around it. Yeah.
So how many extensions do you have currently?
So to start with, we are going to make 3 designs. I have loved hard key phones since a long time, right? And I miss them even today, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, even in our community, share that thing that we still like the days of BlackBerry where we had the tactile keys. with us, right?
There was a whole Gaga BlackBerry community around it.
Yeah, and I could just type naturally without even looking at it, right? And I had the whole muscle memory, which I can't ever do it with the touch keyboards, right? So the first thing that we are doing is we are making a keyboard, right? Which is the first extension, and it is going to be swappable. So we have a trackpad added to it. There's a keyboard. You could plug it in. And now the key thing is because the design is open source, right? Which means anybody from a different world, a different country, trying to add their own language support or their layouts, they have the flexibility to do it. And this is not true for the hardware around us, right? Like we don't really have that flexibility, and that is something that we would like to build in the kind of hardware that we are building today and in the future.
Makes sense.
So who would you say are part of the initial set of users, and what kind of different tasks or applications can they potentially get out of Comet?
Okay, so when we started earlier, and this has all happened organically, right? Like it was not like I started with a very big vision and with like, okay, this could go across a lot of folks, right? But the more that we went down the rabbit hole is when we understood that, okay, this has wider applicability. So you could think of it from, let's say, if we talk about students or people or younger generation, right, who are trying to learn computing or get into engineering, right? They are an important audience for us, right? The way I see it is, if I had something like this in my childhood, I would have learned a lot of things, right? And that is something that we want to enable. So education is one of the areas where they could get the hardware, right? They can know how the software is built. They can learn something as simple as a basic PCB design. They could do CAD design. And now if you see the kind of world we live in, you have 3D printers available. You can upload a PCB design and you can get it home delivered within few days. And it's not that expensive either, right? So that ecosystem exists. So if you ask me, right, I think I'm designing this hardware for a younger me.
So you don't need to open up your own laptops and computers and figure out what inside.
Yeah, if you try to open your laptop, it's a nightmare. I've done that.
Yeah.
And all my childhood, if you'd seen, my desktop would have always been open, right? And my parents had this perpetual complaint that why is this never shut? And then I used to tell them I need to access it all the time, right? And that is something that I want to enable with this, right? Like bring a more sense of creation or inspire, right? Like I've seen my nephews and niece grow now, right? And I get a bit sad when their experience with computers is opening the app, unlocking the device, and hitting the YouTube button and then searching for a video, right? That's now how it's supposed to be. And see, the unfortunate part is that because it has become so transparent nowadays, that the younger generation is never going to appreciate the amount of engineering and the layers and layers of work and contributions that have happened to get us to this stage, right? And that, to me, it feels that may inhibit the growth of the industry further, right? So that is one of the key things which we would like to address with Mecha. I don't know if we'll be able to solve it, but we still want to contribute to it, right? So that is something that we would want to do. Apart from that, obviously, you have people like me who are, in tech, right? Who basically either have a passion about software or hardware, right? And this is a new tool for them to build more stuff, right? It gives them as a platform. So as when we are designing the hardware, we look at it as a platform. Right? We think of it as, okay, what are the kind of offerings that I could give to the end user to be able to choose what to build.
Makes sense.
Right. So the last aspect, right, which as of now is not a priority for us, but we're still exploring, and we've already got a lot of interest on that, is how could this be used in real world applications? It could be in industrialization. It could be in the automotive industry. In fact, there are a couple of space tech companies who have reached out to us where they would want
Wow.
to use it for, trying out POCs or do some pilot applications on it. In fact, as we speak, we have a startup who is incubated at IIT Madras. They are trying to build a small flight computer out of it. Yeah. So yeah, these kind of ideas are all around.
But Shoaib, and we've known you for a bit now, and you've been in the stealth mode for the longest time, right? So you have been discovering the problem on your own and building this product.
Yeah.
But how do you sort of create that feedback loop when you are just building the product, and how do you make sure that all the necessities you want to add in the product are getting covered? And in this process, I mean, one question is obviously, how did you build that feedback loop? And even if you did that, did you get any surprises that, I didn't think about this,
Yeah, so guilty as charged. So I have spent almost more than 3 years now building this. And for good 2 years, we built it in stealth.
Yeah.
I think the reason was not that we were, concerned about getting feedback or, what would people think of it, right? But I think the first year was spent in just figuring out, will we be able to build it or not?
Right.
That was the first year for us where we are still, trying to figure out, okay, is this something that can actually be done? Right? And there are a lot of variables that we had to learn, right? I don't come from a seasoned hardware development background, and I've not done this before. I did run a tech consulting firm for a good decade right before getting into this, but I kind of inched on the software side, but hardware was always, my
First love.
passion or a first love. Yeah. So yeah, it took us first year just to realize if we could actually build it or not, and then we started with the first prototype, and then we eventually got to a stage where we thought, okay, this now we are at a point that we are ready to showcase it, right? And this happened last year from September, where we attended one of, I think, the leading open source event in India, right? It's called India Force 24,
Wow.
which happened in Bangalore. And that's the first time we showcased the hardware to a, very young open source community who we feel are folks that we can easily resonate with, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we started. And since last September, we have been going to countries like, we've been at Austria in Europe, where we showcased it at the Open Source Summit. We had a couple of events in the US. I've given a couple of talks as well on why we are doing this and how the journey has been so far, right? In these kind of technical events, nothing mainstream, but they have been focused towards developers, because my thought was, okay, let's first get what the developers think about it, or people who are very actively working in the open source community think about it, right? So we had a good growing attention, and that happened. Now the biggest thing that happened for us is sometime in October I applied for a program to try and get a slot into CES, which for us was not imagined, right? Like, it was like, okay, this cannot happen, right? I didn't even consider that we could probably get a place at CES, right?
But I think the viewers should also want to know, what is CES?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Fair question. Fair. So CES is, I think, the world's biggest electronics show that happens at Las Vegas every year,
Wow.
right? You have more than 5,000 exhibitors and probably 50,000 folks attending it. And mostly the biggest thing is you have like 5,000 journalists and media folks who attend it as well, right?
Wow.
So it is big, it is huge, right? And we probably did not think we could ever make it, right? But we got into a program. The program is started by a foundation called the Motwani Jadeja Foundation. It's by Asha Motwani Jadeja, who runs a non-profit in the US.
Okay.
Who helps Indian startups go global, right? And she has a lot of concentration over hardware,
Wow.
right? So we got into that program. We had something called the India Pavilion, where around 8 different startups from India were given slots at CES at the Eureka Park, and we were able to showcase the hardware. And I think the biggest surprise that happened, I was at a media event at CES, and a couple of journalists from top tech media, which I have been, following all my childhood, right? They were roaming around and they saw the Comet, and they were so happy to see something of this kind, right,
Yeah.
being built and being shown, right? And yeah, from that, they started writing about it organically, and we just skyrocketed in, I think, early first week of Jan.
Okay.
Right. And we had, I mean, the top tech media journalists wrote about it, and that, caused a cascade where others also started writing about it. We had YouTube videos coming in. And during this time, our Discord community, our, email, my inbox flooded. Right. We had so many people telling us that, okay, this is something that we would really love to see. And the kind of attention that we started getting. And now, like after CES, it has been 6-7 months. We have a solid community who is already very keen on it,
How big
sharing
is the
us the use
community?
cases. So right now we have 4,000 folks in the community,
Wow.
right? And we haven't started accepting orders yet because we feel that, okay, we want to address all the challenges first, right, before we commit for mass production, right?
Fair enough.
So we have been, talking to the community very closely. We have been going on calls with them. A lot of people get shocked when they book a meeting on our website and it's me showing up on the meeting and like, oh, we didn't expect the CEO to come in. And like, yeah, no, your feedback is important,
Yeah,
right? So we've
Even when
been,
I reached out to Shoaib,
Yeah.
I think I just sent him a message on LinkedIn. And usually I just send out messages and I don't really know when they reply. But he responded very quickly. We got on the call. The call was supposedly scheduled only for like 20 minutes or so. And I just told him I'm really keen on knowing what you're doing because it looks so
Right.
interesting.
Right.
And then we ended up talking for close to around 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's Shoaib.
okay.
So,
I should talk
I
less
would
then.
we'd love to rewind a bit. We'd love to know what was your first motivation that kind of led you to build what you're doing right now. Was it, I don't know, was it a spark or was it some form of frustration that led to this?
See, I don't have a fancy story there. And I don't think it just happened like a eureka moment or it was nothing like a spark. But I think there were a lot of factors involved in my, my personal introspection or, the way I look at what I'm learning and what I'm doing, right? And at the same time, professionally as well, right? We had run-ins in my tech consulting firm where we really needed to get some hardware we could deploy software and give it to the user. And me seeing how cloud computing has grown, right, it kept giving me that notion saying that why is this so hard, right? We've already cracked deploying software over cloud, right? And we use it so seamlessly. That's also a remote computing device, right? So why is hardware so difficult? And I used to keep questioning this, right? And we did some deployments. We built some solutions for customers in and out. They've been larger enterprises as well, like like a global energy conglomerates and few FMCGs, which are, big in India, right? We have delivered systems to them, but we really did not like it, right? Like in the sense that, okay, we built a system, but we thought this could have been way better, right? And that's where that thought hung around us, right? Like, okay, why is this really not solved? And at that time, I think this was early in 2020, where I was thinking that, okay, I've spent almost a decade in, building software, building solutions, right? And this is a good time to do something of my own. And I thought, okay, if I do something that is inherently difficult, right? And I know it is difficult and I know I may or may not be able to do it, right? I can't say I can't do it now because I've already gotten far. but yeah, that's where I thought, okay, let's do something that is not going to be easy. And I think that's where the value add happens. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, very motivating. But like you have done it, and I think you've done a great job with your product. I think the clarity you have in terms of the use cases and the market in general is great. But we've seen in the last few years that India is sort of pivoting from software to hardware. And we, as VC fund managers, see a lot of hardware companies coming in. And I think I would really like your perspective, for our audience on how should one go about building a hardware startup? How is it different from software since you come from both the worlds? Like, what is the things you must do? What is the things you must not do? Some words of wisdom.
I think we're still very early on in our journey, so I'm not sure how accurate my observations or I wouldn't call it advice because this is very subjective on the kind of journey that any entrepreneur building hardware or anything for that matter they start, right? But few things that I can say from my learnings in this is that hardware is inherently hard. The word hard is right there. Yeah. So, but then it is not impossible. It is doable, right? And the way that we started is that we started small, right? Earlier, we didn't even know that we are going to actually make a company out of this, right? We thought we'll just build it and see if we can actually get somewhere. Okay, it was an experimental project to start off with. And I think one of the most key aspects that worked for us, and I think that has been and continues to be the focus, is to bring the right folks involved. Right?
Okay.
The hardware, like building hardware has, compared to software, right? You could get around with software engineers who are full stack. They know DevOps, they know front end, they know back end, and can have a designer helping with the interface, and you can actually ship something like this. Right? But in hardware, the challenge happens is that you need multitudes of folks with different skill sets, right? And they all have to be playing together, right, to be able to do this. So a lot of times I refer to my role as like a conductor in the orchestra, where I'm just having different people
Like
play their own musical instruments and their notes, right? Because I have to just coordinate, and so everything has interconnections, right? So the mechanical design team cannot work without the PCB design team, if and the PCB design team cannot work without the software team's input, right? The PCB design team cannot work also with the supply chain's input, right? So everybody is interconnected, right? So you being able to manage, first get that right set of people, right? And they are there in India, right? It's not a surprise. Good. They are there, right? In fact, this is something that has been designed in India. Right. These PCBs, you can see, this is the revision 6 Comet PCBs. This is something that we are, this is our pre-production design, right? And this is something that will get into testing in a month's time, right?
Okay.
So something like this, if you had asked me 3 years back, right, before I started Mecha, that can this be designed in India, I would have said no.
Okay.
Right. But I have been proved wrong.
Wow.
Right.
We should be proud then.
It can be done. And I feel anybody starting this journey, the way that they could look at it is, first, you can't start with an assumption that, okay, you're going to make the hardware and you're going to sell it.
Okay.
Right? It's not going to be that easy of a journey.
All right.
In my view, at least, you need to account for 3 revisions. And if you are as inefficient as I am, then count for 6. Then count for 6.
Yeah.
Right.
Or maybe if you're as perfectionist as he is, then count for 6.
I think it's been a lot of stumbling for us, right? But that is part of the process, and if and that gets shown in the design, right? Like if I sat with somebody and I showed them the revision 1 and the revision 6 now, they will see like a landslide difference, and that's because not just the product, but we as a team and me as a founder have also grown in that journey, right? We've learned a lot of things. We still constantly hit roadblocks, right? And then again, we go back few steps and then we reassess that, okay, now this is where we'll have to decide differently. So anybody trying to build, right, like account for those revisions, right? You can't have an overly optimistic view of things where, okay, I'm going to build it and this is going to start selling and that's it, it's perfect, right? It's not going to happen, right? And I would like to address the elephant in the room, right? It is expensive, right? It requires capital, right? And I have no easy way to put this, saying that, okay, it's going to be very easy and you could do it at marginal cost, right? This will require some commitment. So the way I would look at it if I would have started again is, I would have to see that, okay, for the first revision, right, what are the core things that I would like to address? And can I raise that capital only to get there, right? Like a level 1 in the game, right? I should not focus on reaching level 5. Right. If I can get that much capital arranged, right, or maybe it is my own saving, it would depend on individual to individual, right? Like how can they get it? Maybe somebody who's in a college, they can work with their university to get it, incubated, right? Or there are some grants available, right? There are foundations, or even some companies have, accelerators or some sort of a startup programs which enable you to get more access, right? They exist. You just have to make a lot more effort to find them, right? But they do exist. So the way I would look at it is, okay, let's look at the revision 1, right? Get there, right? Get it to a certain stage, right? Solve the next set of problems in the next revision, and then probably you will be able to get to a stage where you are more confident. Okay, now this is something that I can actually scale with it. Yeah. So that's how I look at it. But I would be very interested to know what's the VC take, or how do investors look at hardware, right? And because I've heard a lot of I talk to a lot of hardware startups, right? And just sharing experiences, and like Darshan said, right, like people ping me and I go on a call with them, and there's learnings on both sides, right? I learn from their journey, they learn from my journey. But one of the things that I've commonly heard from, I've heard from people, is that they're very skeptical of, I will not be able to raise funding for this, right? Investors don't really like hardware, and that notion exists today, right? And I would be very curious to know what do you think about this, and what would you tell, like a young hardware startup on what they could be doing differently?
I thought we were the hosts and you were the guest, but I guess
tables have turned.
Tables have turned. No, I think it's a fair question, and I have been personally in this ecosystem since 2018 now, interacted with a bunch of VCs, with a bunch of startups, and inherently everyone's advised a VC or even an angel investor to stay away from startups who are building in the hardware space, right? So hardware is like a no-go. And the primary reason behind that narrative is that when you're building in India, inherently you are competing with US, because there are a lot of hardware companies in US or other parts of the country. And it takes time. It does not bring in revenue so fast. Like you said, there are multiple iterations, and the chances of failure are extremely high compared to a SaaS. SaaS, at least somebody can acquire a ERP or a CRM if you have built. So, and a lot more capital intensive also. So there was inherently a belief that India cannot build hardware, and India is good in coding and building really good software, because we have a huge software community sitting out there in Bangalore catering, right? But like me or us, Sun Icon as an investor, have always been bullish on hardware. So the first startup investment we ever did was in a hardware company. And post that, from our current fund also, you are the 5th hardware company we have backed. And every hardware company we have backed has been in this similar, extremely early stage. They have had multiple iterations in their product, right? At least 3 to 4 after we have funded. So I think what we have always looked at from my perspective is the founder's logic of building it on the first principle, right? Where your need is very clear, that why are you building it? And that why has to resonate with us. And then we are willing to give that patient capital. And there are other investors like us also. And since Darshan has joined the team, and he has hands-on experience on working on hardware, I think we should hear his perspective also, because that gives us also a lot of confidence when we invest in a company.
Yeah.
I think, for me, it's always been about, when particularly interacting with founders, just really trying to understand the way they potentially describe what they're working on, the kind of attention to detail that they show when they kind of talk about the product that they're building, the kind of previous experience that they have that kind of helps them in what they're doing right now. And just coming from an engineering background, I honestly love to tinker around with prototypes and understand. And in most of the cases, I'm honestly trying to visualize myself as a user and just
Yeah.
understand the use case. So a lot of the times I'm just looking at it from a lens of a customer. And in the case for Mecha, it was really easy for me. I've used a Raspberry Pi board, I've used Arduino, I've used BeagleBones. I understood the problems I'm trying to, potentially debug on the field, and wait, I don't have a monitor. Wait,
Yeah.
I don't have a keyboard. Wait, I have to get all of those things. So I understand the persona he's talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think one important part for me when I'm evaluating or when I'm looking at opportunities is to kind of potentially visualize the kind of use cases and understand who these initial users are. And I think that's one of the things that's been really powerful for me, to kind of look from a lens of an engineer and also visualize the use case.
And I think just to add on, when and these are for all the hardware founders, like you've cracked your product, or you've cracked how are you going to make the product. But for us as an investor or any investor out there, the clarity of the GTM, the issues in the supply chain and how you're going to maneuver around
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Does the unit economics make sense? Is there a market? You really need to brainstorm around it and at least present a use case where, realistically it can be achieved. It's very
Makes
difficult
sense,
for
yeah.
us to back someone who's just going to build for 10 years, right? Our fund lives are 10 years. So
Yeah.
everything needs to be balanced.
Yeah.
And also, I would reiterate on what you said, that there are a bunch of incubators, accelerators, grant options today in India. And it's difficult, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible,
So
yeah.
one should definitely go for that before they go to a VC asking for a $5 million check,
Yeah, institutional funding.
Yeah.
We haven't raised 5 million, but okay.
No, but just you guys.
We want to stay small and lean.
Yeah.
So where do you think Mecha is going? What's next for Mecha?
So right now, we don't want to just aim for the moon and miss the ground, right? So we are completely focused on our first hardware, right? We want to get it right. We have a very strong community interest. We have a lot of people signed up and waiting for us to open up for pre-orders, right? For me, the paramount is, to deliver a solid product, right? And just heads down focus on that, right? So at least for the next 6 months are obviously very critical, because we are trying to take this into mass production now, right? We are trying to get the final revision out, right? But eventually we want to continue building into the Comet ecosystem for at least a year or two, maybe launch similar products, right? And then see organically where to go from there, right? Like I'm very open to a lot of ideas, right? The word mecha also comes from, the Japanese manga side of mecha. Mecha Godzilla. I mean, you may have heard of that. Yeah. So the word is to the mechanical version of living organisms or animals or humans, right? So that's where it comes from. So I'm very keen about robotics and stuff like that. But yeah, I really don't want to lose my attention right now. Okay, let's get one product out, right? Let's build a strong community for it, right? Let's be very much involved in how it scales up over the next few years. And then we can see from there, where we get to. Yeah.
This community building part, in Mecha is something I've always found very exciting. And maybe you are one of the rare hardware startups I know who's solidly engaging and has such a strong community. Any tips and tricks for people on how to build this and what matters?
Yeah, I think that goes back, because a lot of people don't know this, but I spent my high school or the 11th or the 12th grades running a tech forum. Right.
Okay.
So very early on, I have been familiar with building communities for really and at that point there's no monetary incentive. Also, I just built it for the fun of it. Right.
Right.
And I think 10, 15, 20 years later, I am now doing it again. Yeah. So, but yeah, the way I see it is a community for especially for a product like Mecha is paramount, right? And I have been involved in the open source ecosystem. I wish I could have done few things differently in the last 10, 15 years, right? I wish I would have contributed a lot more, right? But I have been active. I've been a Linux user as early as in the 7th grade.
Okay.
So I kind of understand what is expected, and I think in every decision that I take, I kind of end up seeing that, okay, if I am sitting on the other side
Right.
of the table, right? Like if I am one of the community members, right? What would be expected
Yeah.
of the brand or of Mecha or how Mecha goes about it, right? So that is something that keeps making a difference, because every time we have we run into a decision making, I switch sides. Like, no, what if I am in the community, right? And I am on the receiving end, right? Like, is this something that I would like?
Yeah.
Right?
Consumer first sort of an approach.
Yeah, and I think that gives us a lot more clarity, right? And that continues to guide us. Yeah.
And one more question I had in mind is, do you sort of feel any difference that, I'm building from Baroda, most of the tech people are building in Bangalore, and I mean, in the last 1 year, I have seen so many startups coming out of, Bhubaneswar, Baroda, and
Tier 2 cities.
Tier 2 cities, right? So, and there are so many aspirational people in Tier 2 city who just feel कि यार मेरे को Bangalore जाना पड़ेगा, मुझे Hyderabad जाना पड़ेगा,
Yeah.
What is your thought on that?
I think I'm very clear about the fact that the advantages a tier 2 city can offer are disproportionate.
Okay.
Right? Like you can do a lot more, especially when you are starting early on, right? And if and maybe if that is your hometown and you have a access to, let's say, as simple as a place to work. Right, that makes a huge difference. It could be like a room in
आपको
an
rent नहीं देना
apartment.
है.
You don't have to pay rent, right? And if if you are hiring and you see, the thing is you need people, right? Like there are so many different areas of work required here. You need people, right? So the things like payroll cost, right? All of those would be something that you could control a lot more in a smaller city versus doing it in Bangalore. And see, now after COVID, remote work has become so fluidic, or very a normal thing, right? It was not common, or it was uncommon before COVID, right? So even now in Mecha, even though we do have good 7-8 folks working from our city, right, in our office, right, but we have a lot more people working outside, right? So I mean, to me, it's like a no-brainer.
No-brainer.
Yeah.
No, makes sense. No, I think thank you so much, Shoaib. I think this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
I would say thank you for giving us a peek into your world. I think this was a
No,
great
I'm very
conversation.
glad. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a final message for the
Our
people who are
viewers?
listening, for your audience?
No, I think my final message would be as simple as the only limits that you can set are your own. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Nice.
Of. Yeah.
And if anyone's interested in Mecha, in Comet, what should they do next?
Yeah, please jump on our website. It's called mecha.so/comet. You can take a look at it. You have all sorts of links there. You can either jump on our pre-order list. We also are actively working with a lot of pilot users, right, who we are trying to send them our earlier revisions, whatever surplus inventory that we have of the ready devices, we are giving it to them. We are working closely with them in collecting feedback early on, and we want to continue doing that. So if you want to get involved, right, you don't have to get involved in, as a job or like an employment kind of a thing. As an open source engineer, or if you like what we are trying to do, right, just go to our pilot page, just sign up for it, right, and you'll see our email reaching you. Yeah, or just book a meeting. Yeah, no problem.
Nice. No, it was great having you. And to all our viewers, if you guys are building something bold, innovative, solving real problems, please reach out to us at Sun Icon. We love communicating with founders, and we love, I think what drives us as a team is we love partnering with them beyond capital, and that's it. So keep following us, and we'll keep bringing you fun founders like Shoaib in the future upcoming episodes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Darshan.
Thank you all.